Good morning, everyone. It's June 20th, and I'm just going to give a quick update of some of the news surrounding Ukraine, as well as talk about some interesting tactics that are coming out of Russia, as well as Ukraine, in this counteroffensive phase for Ukraine that's going to be taking place over the next 6 months or so. On the international stage, we've always been worried about China and their efforts to potentially support Russia. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in China meeting with the various leadership for different reasons, trying to smooth out relations with the United States. And I may do an overarching thoughts on that when that whole thing completes and we see the outcomes. But Antony Blinken did report that the Chinese government reiterated to him that China is not providing, nor will it provide, lethal assistance to Russia for use in Ukraine. Now, Blinken said this on June 19th, and the United States has not seen any evidence contradicting Beijing's claims. Now, Blinken expressed concern that Chinese companies may be indirectly providing Russia with technology that can be used in the war against Ukraine. Things like microchips that can be dual use for both civilian purposes, but also can be used in warfare, and also technology that could be issued through companies that use proxies, perhaps without Beijing's knowledge, or even with the knowledge, but giving China some sort of plausible deniability. However, again, these are things like microchips and other components rather than entire weapon systems. Now, on the front line near Zaporizhia, we're seeing some pretty smart Ukrainian tactics in their special operations forces, specifically their 73rd Maritime Special Operations Forces, which is similar to what we would call our MARSOC, our Marine Special Operations Command type forces in the U.S. military. Now, they're using trench clearing ability by infiltrating to the rear of the Russian trenches, similar to like a Maginot Line situation in France, where you just go around. And they're using the lower levels in the waterways from the dam destruction. The Kakhovka Dam being destroyed has lowered the water level, so Ukraine are now conducting these amphibious incursions using their Marine Special Forces to enter in behind Russian lines of defense. What's very clear, though, when you watch these videos, and I wish I could put them up, I'm one of the content creators that doesn't get away with putting war footage up, or get away with, when I put it up, that it doesn't get taken down immediately, or I get community guidelines violations. So I learned early on in the war and me talking about this that I'm just not going to put up war footage, unfortunately. You can see it on Twitter and other places, but there's some pretty clear footage of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces clearing trenches, and these forces are using really smart tactics. They're using what we'd call slice the pie techniques, where as they go around a corner, you slice the pie so that you can see around the corner with your rifle, and the minute you cross the threshold, you can engage any targets. They're also using entry cover. They're stacking up. They're as one turns a corner, one stays focused straight ahead so that they can cover any kind of access by the enemy. And so no one gets in behind them. Very smart. However, on the other hand, the Russians are looking very confused, looking very poorly trained. And you can see that they're just running through the trenches without clearing any corners, clearing any rooms, not clearing any type of spaces before moving forward, which is allowing the Ukrainians to get in behind them. And one of the videos shows one Russian just casually walking through the trenches with his weapon slung, barrel pointing at the ground. He walks by a T intersection, doesn't even see a Ukrainian fighter, and gets shot. Another is running with his weapon at the hip, like he's doing a bayonet charge, not even aiming down the sights. So while the Ukrainians are using very good tactics, and again, these are their special operations forces, the Russians, and these are poorly trained Russian conscripts, are using really bad tactics and are getting killed for it. Now, mind you, these are forces that are in the third level line defenses, so they probably aren't the most elite troops, but at the very least, they need to know how to conduct operations within their environment, and they're just not able to do that. And because of that, they're getting killed. Another video, and this is even more surprising than the poorly trained Ukrainian or Russian fighters, the Russian conscripts, but in another video, the Russian army used a radio-controlled T-55 as a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. Now, this is something that usually you take like a car or a van or something and you drive it, and then it's packed full of explosives and it explodes, causing massive amounts of destruction and death. Similar situation you would see in much of the Middle East. Many U.S. soldiers know what vehicle-borne IEDs are, VBIEDs, and they're the devastation they cause. What you don't usually see is advanced militaries using things like this, converting a Russian army tank into a VBIED filled with tons of TNT to drive remotely towards the Ukrainian front lines in the Donetsk Oblast is very strange. Now, this attempt failed because the remotely controlled bomb ran into a mine about 100 meters from the front line, but then it was hit by a Ukrainian RPG, and a massive explosion takes place. And again, the video's online. I wish I could share it, but again, anytime I share any kind of war footage, and I've done it a couple times, it gets me banned. In fact, on YouTube, I got a demonetization permanently just for showing Yevgeny Prigozhin talking. So I'm not special like some, I guess. What's interesting is as Ukrainian, as evidenced by the trench clearing procedures, they're learning strategy and tactics from NATO fighters. But as Russia uses vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, VBIEDs, you have to wonder where are they getting these tactics from. And it's more like they're getting them from ISIS than anything in concrete SOPs or concrete doctrine from their own fighting forces. Now, in addition, Russia is struggling to fight at night against Ukrainians who are supplied with Western-provided night vision, thermals, infrared optics, etc. The reason isn't necessarily that the Ukrainians are employing these optics more effective. It's that the Russians just don't even have them. They don't have night vision. I mean, a single helmet-mounted night vision can cost as much as the entire salary of a Russian soldier, and that is showing the inability to fund this war that Russia is experiencing. And it was well known before that Russia struggled to fight at night on the ground level. Now, yes, their advanced helicopters and things like that will have night vision, or even some of their tanks will, and they've been seen upgrading some of their older like T-55, T-72 tanks with more advanced night vision, but they're running out of them, and they can't afford to give them to their lowest level troops. In kind of a more disgusting manner, but par for the course for Russia's history, Russia has been found to be castrating Ukrainian prisoners of war. Again, this is a war crime. Just add it to the list of Russian war crimes. Additionally, the Speaker of Russia's State Duma is now telling its citizens that those Russians who have fled to Europe are now experiencing concentration camps. This comes after they're twisting the words of Western leaders, talking about how concentration camps were used by the Nazis, and obviously they make the equivalents of Nazis in Ukraine. So now they're saying that Europeans and Ukrainians are using concentration camps, as if phones don't exist in this day and age, and these Russians are probably still calling back to their friends and family that are stuck in Russia. And then additionally, Russian soldiers were seen on a drone fleeing the front line. Now, that's nothing new. They've been seen doing this across much of the front line, especially in the Donetsk region where many of the conscripts get scared and run away. But now we're seeing Russia employ containment forces, which are Russian soldiers that send conscripts into the meat grinder. If those conscripts flee, they just get shot by the Russian soldiers. This is something that was well known as to have happened throughout pretty much every war that Russia was struggling to fight throughout history. So it just continues in the 21st century. And then finally, on the news front, Russia is accusing the U.S. of planning to drop malaria-bearing mosquitoes on Russian troops. Once again, coming back to this, we're using birds, we're using mosquitoes, etc., to try and kill Russian troops or get them sick. More than likely what this means is that Russian troops are getting malaria because they have no vector control in their systems for protecting their troops. They also don't give them malaria pills like we got in the Western world, which are disgusting and horrible, but they do work at stopping malaria. They're not giving them to the Russian soldiers, so now the Russian soldiers probably are getting malaria, and rather than own up to the fact that they suck at this, they're blaming the West on dropping malaria-laden mosquitoes on Russian troops, as if they discriminate and say, I'm not going to bite that Ukrainian, I'm going to bite the Russian. And then finally, before I let you go, I just want to give a shout out to a lot of my soldiers from the past, especially a lot of the staff that helped me with things like that, planning that cool event at Arrowhead Stadium, planning trips to the Harley-Davidson factory, Boulevard Brewery. One of those is former First Sergeant, retired Mueller. He was a big help on my staff with that, as well as at the time, Lieutenant Long. Many have been promoted since then, but outstanding help. All my first sergeants, big help. And I just wanted to give them a shout out at the end of this video. So thanks, everyone.